This is the time and place for the Grand Forks City Growth Fund Committee, an advisory group to the city's Jobs Development Authority. We'll begin with a roll call.
I'll handle that, Brett. Dockler?
Here.
Holt?
Here.
Weber?
Here.
Weigel?
Here.
Wolf? Chris, I think you're muted.
Can you hear us there, Chris?
There he goes. Oh,
Looks like he's here. But I'm
it
not sure.
appears that he's here. He's going in and out on the microphone. Hopefully that works out.
In any case, we have a quorum.
We have a quorum. Very good. Item number 2 on the agenda, approval of the minutes from the January 27, 2020 meeting. Any comments or discussion? If not, looking for a motion.
Move approval.
Very good.
Second.
A motion from Mr. Weigel, a second from Ms. Dockler. Any further comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. It's not on the agenda, but economic development, economic recovery are top of mind issues for many, if not all of us in the community. Mayor Brown has been active in engaging local officials, state officials, the local community, and I've invited him in to speak and give us an update on some of the activities there.
Well, thank you very much. So I'd like to speak on 3, 4, and 5 as well later. But as having been here for 20 years, I remember in 1997, Hal Gershman and other people in the community led the charge to build the event center. And people right then were going, no, we can't afford it. No, now is the time to hunker down. No. I was so proud of our community that they voted to build that because it showed me they had faith in their future. And then Ralph Eggleston donated the Ralph Eggleston Arena. But the fact that our community was positive and optimistic showed, and we wouldn't have that if we'd hunkered down. So it's the same thing now. We need to be more vigilant than ever in the future of our community, investing in our future. And we'll get through tough times. And if you ask old people, what do they wish they'd done? They wish they'd invested more in their future. So I think this is the time and the place, and you're the group, so let's do it. We have another recovery ahead of us.
Brett, I think you're muted. You're muted, Brett.
Thanks. And Mayor, you were leading meetings with the Bank of North Dakota, local lenders, and Department of Commerce. Could you speak on those and any other meetings?
Yes, it's so fun. When we met with Eric at the Bank of North Dakota, he said, you're the only community. We meet with other people like the Commerce, Michelle Comer, we meet with her. She goes, you're the only community. So I think we have a leadership role. We are focusing on the future. We're optimistic. And that's what they like to see. And they want to be part of it. That's what I think is so wonderful to see. We have partners out there that are willing to listen. And then I think they said go federal first and then state as it comes. But there's resources, and I think our activity, we're at the forefront.
Very good. Thank you, Mayor. Next item on the agenda, item 3, financial status report on Fund 5996 and 2163. Ms. Dorstad.
Andy, it says I've been disabled from sharing my screen.
Thank you, Chairman Weber. And that was Jessica. She's going to share the screen for me here.
Very good. Thank you, Jessica.
But I would like to say that, you know,
Try that, Jessica.
that I have directed city staff and our economic development funds, 5996 and 2163, to look at our new normal, new recovery. And we need to continue, as I said previously, to invest in ourselves, because now is the time is more critical than ever. So let's continue with that philosophy. We need to look at high-tech entrepreneurs and companies for workforce collaborations. We need to continue to invest in our quality of life, because we've seen one recovery and we'll see another. And we have to be at the forefront. So we can work with our strategic partners to work forward. So I appreciate this group and its forward thinking. So now I'll let Jessica speak.
Thank you, Mayor and Brett. Actually, this is Maureen. I'm going to speak. Jessica is going to share the screen here with me and provide any backup as we go through here. But Jessica, if you could start with the Fund 2163, I think I'm going to start with that fund first. So thank you, Chairman Weber, members of the Growth Fund Committee, Mayor Brown. What I'm going to go through with you here, as in the past, in a format that you should be familiar to you. First of all, I'm just going to briefly go over this fund. There's two funds that I'm going to go through with you. The first being our Fund 2163, which is Economic Development Fund. That's where a portion of your 1% city general sales tax goes for economic development efforts. And then second, we'll get into the JDA fund, your 5996, and that's where the bulk of the money is set aside for your efforts. But first of all, starting with Fund 2163 here, I should just state, can everybody hear me okay?
Very good. Yes.
So what we wanted to show here is starting from top to the bottom here, how this is, first of all, structured. We start with revenue at the top for your beginning estimated cash balance, and then your budgeted expenditures, and then finally at the bottom, running balance of the estimated projected cash in this fund. So starting at the top, like I said, what the revenue source for economic development is a portion of that sales tax. That, of course, has taken quite a hit with the impacts of COVID-19. What we have done here is project a significant decrease in here, and then slowly build that back up to more normal levels. But what we showed here per Chairman Weber's request is to show you a side-by-side comparison of 2020 budget, as you saw in your 2020 budget book, compared to what we're projecting now. And just so you know, this is in draft form. We continue to look at this, what its impacts are, and take more direction as we go forward on this. But for now, we do have our projected revenue stream of the roughly 1.25 million. That's right now what we're estimating is about a 30% reduction from what was budgeted for sales tax for 2020. So that's the numbers. That's how we get to the 1.25. We have the 20,000 goes down to 8,500. That's what that is we have different overtime related to police services for different events. This is what we bill out for on the top, and then you're going to see a corresponding at the expense category down below. We've reduced both of those just with less events going on throughout the summer months. And then going down further here, you can see the different areas that we've targeted these special events or economic development monies toward. Some of the significant changes in looking at the 2020 budget versus now what we're projecting are, we pulled out some strategic infrastructure, transportation related funding out of this fund to be, that had been transferred into Fund 4815. So in our projection now, what we talked about, if you can see, let's see, starting in the year 2022, you're going to see toward the bottom of your spreadsheet there, $150,000. And then, thank you, Jessica. And then going forward, just to give you just a brief history here, what we used to do between this fund and our JDA fund is we used to transfer $500,000 annually from our economic development sales tax into our JDA for different strategic efforts with related to the JDA. What we do have in here is we have done a lot with this fund. We do have some bond payments we're making that were made and related to that effort. Roughly 300 to 350,000 a year in bond payments, as you can see below the 150. What we have for discussion purposes, and this will be more discussion with council as we go through the budget, was $150,000 a year going forward beginning in 2022 from this fund to JDA for those efforts. So just a little different how we're showing that from the past, and we'll go through more of that as we go forward, like I said, in budget discussions. And then down toward the bottom, you'll see we did have a targeted, I believe in for town square or downtown related. Right now, we're just We pulled that out for now. We have a reserve for beautification down below, right before the estimated cash available there at the bottom, for more discussion on those related efforts. So that's in a nutshell. If you could go over to the right, Jessica, so you can see a comparable. Well, first of all, with 2020, I'm sorry, Jessica, if you could go back to the left. So when I look at the blue column there, 2020, compared to what we're projecting now, with those adjustments, we're bringing it in line comparable to around the same cash balance in this fund. And then, Jessica, if you go to the right, just for comparable purposes, you can see where we were at. We're estimating it, you know, the cash balance at the end compared to what we had in our previous 5-year projection included in the budget. And then if we could go forward, Jessica, to 5996, that's more for this group's discussion. The revenue streams here coming from your rental income, rental and loan income. We do have some transfers from our 2163 fund to help out with operations of this fund, and you can see those. It's structured the same as the previous spreadsheet, with revenues at the top, expenditures at the bottom, and ultimately at the very bottom, an estimated running cash balance here. So as we go through this, you can see we did project, or we do have in our projected 2020 column, land sales of $1 million. The footnotes are important on this spreadsheet, that we do have one approved sale there that's included and one that's on your agenda tonight. We've included that impact on the revenue side. As you go down, we do have some wages that get paid out of here. One of the things I wanted to point out here is when we get into the administration and loans and maintenance and operations of JDA buildings, prior to this projection, we were lumping those into one line, and it seemed to be just not a good depiction of the activity in the fund. So what we decided to do was to break that out. So now we have a separate line for our maintenance and operations directly related to the JDA buildings. And then we pulled out the administration and loans separately. You're gonna see in that admin and loans drop from 2020 to 2021, and that's another difference I wanted to point out. We budget for possible loans as part of the budget of about $850,000, but it seemed to be skewing the numbers when going forward as far as what's available. It appeared like an expense on the projection instead of this available for loans. So what we did was, going in the projected years, then we backed that out. So that's why you see that drop from 2020 to 2021. And so instead, going forward, it'll just show in that available balance. And then finally, we have some special assessments that are paid through here. We have some contingencies for strategic initiatives. For now, we did pull out any Herald-related building fit-up costs for more discussion and review. It's footnoted at the bottom of this spreadsheet. But for now, that has come off. And then as far as land and capital purchases, that's another thing I wanted to point out. With this reserve, what we did was for smoother budgeting and to avoid peaks, spikes in one year to the next as far as capital, we've decided just to put more of an even amount each year to set aside for those needs. And then finally, this does assume a sale of Corporate Center and Cirrus. You're gonna see also a corresponding transfer to CDBG for that amount from the Corporate Center sale that would need to be moved over into CDBG purposes. So with that, I think I covered most of what we've been working through in this fund, and any changes, unless Jessica, you have anything to add that I failed to point out.
Nope, I don't think so.
And of course, we're both here for questions of the committee.
Very good. Questions from committee members? Questions, comments? Very quickly, I want to just confirm we have been, the standard process has been $500,000 a year from 2163 to 5996. That has been zeroed out for the next 2 years and reduced over the the 5-year period from 3 million down to 600,000. Am I reading that correctly? That would be back on 2163.
Yeah, can you move back to 2163, Jessica?
I'm guessing this amount.
We did have a large amount of street transportation related strategic infrastructure dollars budgeted out of here. We do have a significant impact, of course, with the lower projections on sales tax. And so we have pulled those projects out, and going back to the philosophy more of $500,000 roughly a year toward our JDA for their efforts. So we'll just, what we're showing here is the projects that have been done to date that we're paying on the bonds that's still coming out of this fund. And then we'll allocate, if council is agreeable to this, allocate a remainder, trying to get close to that $500,000 a year to the JDA fund. We had about,
go ahead.
oh, I believe we had about $2 million worth of street infrastructure projects in here in that 6-year period that were pulled out.
Okay. It's always a risky thing to be, for me to be questioning any of the logic behind this. I haven't won awards year after year after year as you have, Maureen. But that sharp cut from 2163 to 5996 is somewhat concerning to me. Fortunately, we have some good reserves already, and you're increasing the reserves in 5996. So that.
And I'm not saying, Brett, that those projects won't be done. I think, either it's out of JDA or in partnership with our street infrastructure fund to do it. Anyway, that we had to make adjustments to compensate for the declining revenue here.
Right. There are accounting and revenue realities that have to be addressed. As much as possible, though, I'm going to be looking for ways to push us to grow our way out of this rather than cutting our way out of this. I do have one final thing that I'd like to mention, line 39 on 2163. This is the CSG, or Human Needs.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I meant to speak to that. Thank you for putting that out, Mr. Weber. If you go down, Jessica, to the footnote regarding human needs. So as footnote number 5 states, we still have human needs, a budgeted human needs being funded. It's just reflected out of a different source of funds. So in 2020, if you remember, we were able to get through the CARES Act that CDBG allocation of $268,000. So that was approved to use for this human needs component. And then as far as the 2022, can you go back up again, Jessica? So we have that large, we're gonna have CDBG dollars coming in here projected for the sale of the corporate center, and that can be used for human needs. So sounds like the timing with it, in speaking with Meredith, it would be available the year after that sale. So that's why you see that where we have it in the 2021 assume for human needs and pull it out for 2022 and then come back in 2023. It's just the timing of that money available for the CDBG component of that sale.
Let me speak from my head and from my heart. From my head, I recognize what's going on and the logic behind it. We had a windfall, we could call it, of CDBG, additional CDBG funds this year. We have revenue cuts anticipated. So why would we're looking for anywhere that we can to make up for lost revenue. On the other hand, I think those CDBG funds came in recognition that we are going to have vastly expanding human service needs. And so from my heart, I'm troubled that we would be cutting these hard fought, well, not hard fought, but it's been a long time coming to work to get those human needs funds into the budget. So I'm going to continue to be looking at that possibility from whether it's 5996 or somewhere else. if those human needs do show up, and I suspect that they will. But for now, from my head, I recognize the logic and probably time to move forward, unless there are other comments from other members of the committee.
Mr. Weber.
Weigel. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. Just briefly, I'm not sure if this is for Meredith or Ms. Dorstead. Can you just give us a brief synopsis of what these funds can be used for?
Was that, Mr. Weigel, was that related to CDBG funds?
No, just,
Human needs?
well, not human needs, just this money in general from the Economic Development Fund.
As far as the Economic Development Fund, you know, it is for that purpose to try to grow the economy, you know, make it quality of life, and you know, many of the needs that you're seeing when you look at the breakdown of how it is being spent on those activities. And then your JDA fund is more directly related to that business sector with growing jobs, job development. So I don't know if that completely answers your question, Mr. Weigel.
It does. Thank you.
Chairman Weber, if I may, Maureen, if you could just really briefly again go over the reserve for the beautification, the public art, the downtown development reserve that you've got that line item. Can you just quickly again what we were going to do with that fund and how this is impacted by this and what the plan is for that?
Right. Thank you, Mr. Holt. So what we did, we used it prior. We had allocation budgeted directly for town square / downtown development, bringing in that reserve that was available to that point for that. We still have the reserve. You can see that on the second to the bottom line there, money set aside, but to be determined exactly how those funds will be spent.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. And then second question, and this might be for Meredith or Mr. Brooks or anybody, but regarding the corporate center, any thoughts on, with everything that's happening right now, how that might impact the potential sale of corporate center, either in terms of timing or price, or have we not got that far yet?
It's my understanding that if we were to not sell it, the continued revenue from rental income would be beneficial for the city. Our desire to sell is both part of the condition of the original funding for the building, and it's still completely favorable for the purchasers. The amount that they'd be paying in rent compared to the cost of buying it, it's still a good deal for them. But I'll have Mr. Brooks or Ms. Dorstad, anyone else, comment on that.
Well, this is Meredith. We're proceeding as if the sale will occur, just perhaps not as rapidly. You can see the money's just moved into 2021 instead of 2020 in terms of, you know, when it would actually be receipted. And we're actively pursuing some of the, you know, logistical issues needed to, for instance, separate the corporate center from the corporate ramp and make those both, you know, functional as standalone properties. So we're proceeding. As Chairman Weber said, we do have written into the original agreements that window when the tenants have the opportunity to buy. COVID hasn't changed that window, so we haven't looked too much further into the details of exactly when, or, you know, how, when we would have that final appraisal ordered to determine the price.
Sure.
But we're kind of proceeding along a slightly modified path, but only slightly. Ryan, do you have anything different you want to add?
Well, I think you summed up everything, but remember the Corp 1 is the one that has the actual contractual purchase options in it. Corp 2 does not. So, but we have the thought is that we do sell them both at the same time.
Okay, good.
Very good. And then to Mr. Weigel's question earlier, the purpose, the potential application of 2163 funds. This is in city code. It's the intent and purpose of the City Growth Fund to accommodate the community and region at large with a cohesive governing body that through direct and indirect actions will encourage the creation of new jobs, enhance the economic climate, save existing jobs, create new wealth, enhance the local property tax base, encourage capital investment, and improve the quality of life, enhance tourism and local events, promote public-private or public-private enterprises or partnerships, and diversify the local economy.
Chairman Weber, you stated it perfectly.
Very good.
Mr. Weber.
Because I was reading it, that's all.
Mr. Weber, just real quick, thank you for that. The reason I ask is because we talk about so often how we're in unprecedented times, and we've never seen this, and it's been how long, and everything along those lines. And the reason I ask is because, is there other ideas that this funding could be used for to help businesses? And so while we are in unprecedented times, maybe that calls for unprecedented actions to make sure businesses are taken care of, to save jobs, to spur new innovation. I just don't want to sit back on things that we've always done. I want to look for new ways that we can do different things as well and have the most impact with this money, and not just sitting back in our chair and focusing on things in the past.
Very good, and I agree with you completely. In fact, already over the last a few years, this group has been doing exactly that. We've taken the mission in the city code and looked for new innovative ways to do that. And we've changed quite a bit in the last couple of years. And I think that this group should continue to look for new innovations within that broad mission statement. Ms. Dorset?
No, agreed. And I think too, we want to see what comes through from federal and state means as we look at that also and how we enhance that. So that's how we're approaching it at this time. We need to see what is coming through the pipe and working with our group on looking at what programs will help supplement that and not maybe duplicate something.
The mission statement as in code is actually far broader than the practices of the last 20, 30, 40 years, longer, right? And so this is an important time for us to be innovative in our approaches to addressing that mission and serving that mission. And with that, if there's any further questions, otherwise we'll move on to
Mr. Weber?
Yes, please, Mr. Sandy. Council
Sorry.
President Sandy.
Yeah. I assume, I don't know why these documents weren't listed on the city's website or why we didn't have them in advance of the meeting. I can only presume it's because they were still being worked on today. So it would be great if they can be emailed out as well as listed on the city's website so that this, because these are public documents, it'd be nice if they were out in the public domain. Thank you.
Very good. And this will be going to the JDA. What is the date for our JDA meeting?
Well, these items are strictly informational, but the JDA meeting will be May 4th.
All right. And where will these be made available on the for the public?
They should just be added to the agenda. And then you can go back and find the agenda and find them.
Right, we can link those after the fact to the agenda item.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Sandy, Ms. Richards. Item number 4, overview of BND local lender meeting. Mr. Mayor, did you have anything on this? And then Mr. Lund?
Just what we had discussed before, that we met with Eric Hardmeyer, and he said that Grand Forks has a special place in his heart because of the 1997 flood. And I remember one of the smartest things the council did was they borrowed money from the Bank of North Dakota to pay the city employees during their recovery. So they weren't worried about their recovery, they were worried about the city's recovery. And that got the city back on its feet much faster. And he did suggest a wait and see approach to see what federal and state comes through before we start acting locally. But he was very receptive to our meeting with them and happy that we were reaching out and happy we were being proactive among the other cities in North Dakota. So now I'll turn it over to you.
Very good. Thank you, sir. And whenever I go into these meetings, often I find that there's this guy who seems to be everywhere around the state, already ahead of the game, and that'd be Mr. Lund. Keith, you were in these meetings. Would you speak to that lender meeting?
Happy to, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for the kind words. Yeah, the meeting with the lenders really was really a follow-up to the business listening sessions that the community had, and I really want to congratulate and acknowledge the leadership of the mayor and you, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chairman, Mr. Holth, and the Council and Growth Fund. Tried to understand the impacts of regional businesses. We had a number of conversations with industry, with specific sectors, and tried to understand that. In addition to speaking with affected businesses, we wanted to speak to local lending community and the state lending community to really, this was shortly after the SBA program and the CARES Act were announced. And we wanted to understand, I think, how those programs were working with businesses and really any gaps that were being acknowledged, I guess, from local and state partners. We were fortunate to have 4 local lenders, Corey Cleveland from Valley Bank, Chris Johnson from Choice Financial, Kevin Bido from Bremer Bank, and Matt Jacobson from Alaris. As I mentioned, in addition to the local banks, we wanted to get the state's perspective and understand, you know, what the state was considering in terms of their response. Before I get to some of the findings of that meeting, and I'm just going to piggyback a little bit on what Mayor Brown said. Well, first of all, we had the Bank of North Dakota President, Eric Hardmeyer, so we were very fortunate to have him as a part of our conversation, as well as Todd Steidwan and Kelvin Hullett from the Bank of North Dakota. And then we were joined by Josh Teagan from the North Dakota Development Fund. That's another financing program at the State Department of Commerce. Before getting into some of the feedback, I want to just share some of the comments of Bank of North Dakota President. Again, piggybacking a little bit about what the mayor said, that he was not aware of any community in the state that was having these business listening sessions, and that he was extremely complimentary of the community's effort to go the extra mile to do that and complimented the leadership of the community. He mentioned that Grand Forks was the only community who engaged the Bank of North Dakota in the state in this important conversation. He said it was critically important, and then it was going to be his intent to have these conversations with other communities. Again, congratulated us and said that Grand Forks was really a model for the entire state. So it was very nice, kind words from Eric Hardmeyer. As I mentioned, we had the conversation with the local lenders shortly after the SBA and CARES Act were launched, and we tried to understand some of the gaps. I guess there were some nuanced program gaps that were identified, such as the PPP in particular is focused on payroll expenses, and there were some businesses whose payroll expenses were low, but operating expenses were higher, and those programs didn't necessarily fit as folks thought that they were designed. Also, I'm sorry, just looking at my notes, I'm not reading my notes very well. Also, there were some bandwidth issues in terms of just so many loans going through the pipeline, both the local lenders, they were just, I don't want to say overwhelmed, but there were a lot of loans in the pipeline, both at the SBA and at the local lending level. So there were concerns about pushing all those loans through and being as responsive as they could possibly be. And the biggest concern really from the local lending community was sustainability. These programs are going to help for a period of time. The question was how long. They were addressing some of the expenses of the business, but they certainly weren't addressing any of the revenue shortfall and those revenues returning to businesses, you know, particularly restaurants, retail, and hospitality, who rely so much on foot traffic and that were significantly reduced. I guess at the end of the day, number one, because the programs were so new, the full impact was not known also to the businesses through the listening session, but also from the local lending community. And they agreed to continue to stay engaged to provide that feedback to us. In terms of the state of North Dakota, primarily from Eric Hardmeyer, again, the Bank of North Dakota president, he said that he had been in a number of meetings at the state level to try to understand, you know, the impact and what necessarily a state response would be. They needed to understand what the federal response was, and he made the comment that none of us at the state level or the local level have the resources to duplicate what the federal government was doing. And so that was sort of an underlying and fundamental principle that he at the Bank of North Dakota, and he thought that other state partners are following. He felt that the state's role, in his opinion anyway, was to focus more on stabilization and sustainability. And it was actually a key takeaway that he learned, I guess, or took away from the flood of 1997, when the state of North Dakota came in and provided business support for Grand Forks businesses, and then later on, a number of years later, in Minot as well. He said that in his opinion that the state should be looking at working capital loans, supporting those with generous terms. from a programmatic standpoint. And I don't know that we have the time to go through those today, but those programs were announced by the governor and through many press releases just on Friday, providing, I think, very favorable terms. If we have time, I'd love to go through them, but I know we have a long agenda. Before we concluded the call, I guess I'd say with all on the call, both the local lenders that I mentioned and their state partners committing to remain engaged and to be a resource moving forward. And I'll just conclude my remarks to say that I feel very fortunate to be a part of the state of North Dakota and part of the Grand Forks community, where people convene over serious issues and try to develop solutions and not really worry about who gets the credit. It's just, it's really a joy to work on behalf of the community and Grand Forks County and within the state of North Dakota. So I'll just leave it there and would be very happy to answer any questions.
Mute, Brett.
Very good. Thanks, Keith. Any questions for Mr. Lund?
This is Jonathan. I might just add, not a question, but a comment. But I was a part of that meeting as well. And I know we're not going over the terms of the programs that were announced, but to me, when the programs were announced, it felt like it was almost a direct response to some of what the lenders were asking for and people were saying in that listening session that we had with them. So it really felt to me like the Bank of North Dakota was listening and responded appropriately. So just a comment.
We keep getting that feedback. Not only are we kind of ahead of the curve, but they're hungry for our ideas and the information that we're gathering at the local level. So yeah, thanks, Jonathan. Mr. Mayor, going back to the state of the city, and before that, you've been a proponent of the development of high tech in our community. Before we go into the next a few items, would you like to say a few words?
I really would. So, you know, this council, the EDC, and everybody, we have turned the economic engine of this community. The ship is heading in the right direction, and this right direction is investing in ourselves. And a key part of that I see is the collaboration, like you said, but we got that Harrow building, and we got partners invested in it. We have EDC, the county, the schools, the library, Grand Forks Public. So we have all these things working together, and then we have air autonomy. So we are setting the stage for our future, and that's so important. And it didn't happen overnight. It happened because we worked together, we shifted things. And like we heard earlier, it doesn't matter, like he said, it doesn't matter who gets the credit. We get the benefits. So I really appreciate working on this, and I'm anxious to hear these ideas because it's like the event center 20 years ago. We're investing in our future, and now is a critical time to make that happen.
Very good. And before we move on with the high tech aspect of today's meeting, a quick note: we got news this afternoon. Sales tax revenue before COVID hit, we're up over 6% from last year. So much was going well. And now that will just help to make us even more resilient as we deal with the recovery. Mr. Bombach from the EDC, if you'll take items 5, 1, 2, and 3, please.
Thank you, Chairman Weber, committee members. I appreciate the opportunity to introduce this item and more importantly, our guests today. Thank you. I'll just start by saying thank you, Mayor, for the leadership on this high-tech sector development, and Council Member Sandy just beginning to lead that effort. We were just getting going. The high-tech priority of that sector development has been an economic priority for quite some time, to grow and diversify the regional economy for a couple of reasons. For one, we have a strong base within our business assets and our research university located in Grand Forks. And then two, there's an ongoing and growing need for these high-paying, high-quality careers. So it's the right time. Today, we come into this with the same values I heard in what Councilmember Weigel was talking about, in that we need to think creatively on where we're going from here. We wanted to provide just an update on some of these, on the priority itself, the high-tech priority, and also some momentum we've had built prior to COVID coming into the whole equation. It was a priority before, and it remains to be one. And so it's worth sharing just a couple of great things we have going on. The examples of this momentum are the guests today. And these guests really demonstrate opportunities to grow through this challenging time. So Among them today, I'll make quick introductions and then go ahead and get out of the way. And then we'll just go through them in order that I introduced them rather than handing off, just to make this a little bit easier on everybody. So I'll first start with Air Autonomy. Josh Reedy and his team are here to represent the company. He wants to give you an update. Autonomous UAS drone company leading in their industry. I'll remind you they received a $50,000 grant from the JDA in December 2018 to leverage a Microsoft TechSpark grant. And since that time, there's been many, many developments, including earning a $1 million loan from the North Dakota Department of Commerce through the LIFT program. Secondly would be a company called Tailory. Brianna Salsky is a local entrepreneur. You may have seen her storefront Curious, both downtown and on 32nd Avenue. She has learned a great deal in that business of retail and has then leaned into a development, this new company called Tailory, which is a social tech platform that connects brands and customers tailored to their preferences. She's also had a lot of success to speak of, raised nearly $1.5 million in capital, including very similar, a $750,000 loan from the North Dakota Department of Commerce through their LIFT program. And then lastly, to support companies like Air Autonomy and Tailory, the mayor has outlined the vision of a tech campus in the state of the city and asked Councilmember Sandy to really lead that effort. A partner in that vision right away was in the University of North Dakota Center for Innovation. Amy Whitney is here with us today, and her team identified a grant opportunity through the Economic Development Administration that provides needed workforce to really build out a lot of that tech campus vision. So there was a lot of momentum coming into this point in time, and we want to give you an update on all those things. And again, with that idea of really growing through this time, as the mayor started us off with. So with that, I will hand it off to Josh. Happy to stand for any questions of my own near the end of these three presentations.
Very good. Thank you, Brandon. Welcome, Josh. You and your team, take it away, please.
Thank you very much. And as you can see, we are busier than ever. So you have me in a t-shirt in the office. So for that, I apologize. I have Dr. James Higgins with us, the co-founder of Air Autonomy, as well as Chuck Pinio from the UND Aerospace Foundation. And others you may not be able to see. I have members of the Air Autonomy team listening in as well. And try to keep comments or words brief, but they say that necessity is the mother of invention. And if you look at where we're at in today's society, for all the bad that has occurred through the pandemic, there is good that has occurred. And Air Autonomy is positioned well to receive the ray of sunlight that's coming through. And a lot of that has to do with technology. Let's be honest, Zoom, the meeting that we're on today, simply is a recognition of a technology that already existed. And for Air Autonomy, since the pandemic has occurred, we have been busier than ever because, quite frankly, our technology is an even stronger fit in the world we live in today than the world we lived in several weeks ago. Since the time that we had the chance to visit in January, we've had a number of developments. We have completed our first production work successfully with a local customer that is tremendously happy with the outcome. We have bid on our first major national RFP, going head to head with the competition, and we've come away from that successful. And I am happy to report that today, as we speak, Xcel Energy is using our solution. Essential workers are using our solution on site themselves. And I'm happy to report that I do believe the best is to come. Although I can't share details, we hope to be working towards an exciting development with Xcel Energy and the test site. And beyond that, we are really accelerating into market. We are feeling good about what we're doing. The team is growing, not shrinking. And I think it's an opportunity for not just Air Autonomy, but the UAS industry, in particular the North Dakota UAS technology industry, to demonstrate to the world, what it is we're capable of in the North Dakota ingenuity that we do have. So I wanted to simply give a brief update to, again, show that some companies are thriving And that may be a message that has a mixed reception in this day and age. But we are proud to be from North Dakota. We are proud to do what we do. And I can tell you that we are embarking upon a substantial growth opportunity. And as a North Dakota company, we fully intend to come before this group and seek assistance as we grow into that market opportunity. That being said, I'll ask Chuck Pinio, UND Aerospace Foundation, strong partner along with Microsoft and Excel, if you'd like to add anything, Chuck.
In fact, Chuck, before you do, I'd like to note that Grand Forks City was one of the early investors in Airtonomy, but in many ways, we took the lead of Chuck and your team at Aerospace. So please.
Yeah, no, I don't really have much to add other than I know that we as a board discussed Airtonomy and our involvement in continuing putting resources in it, which we are heavily right now. And we're just really excited about all the progress. I think Josh has given you sort of a little bit of an overview, and unfortunately he can't give you all the details, but no, we're just really excited and really appreciate all the support we've had. And Mr. Weber, absolutely, you were instrumental this group in helping us get going, as was Microsoft and others. So now that things are looking really good, especially as Josh indicated, in a time where you really wonder how are some of these businesses doing. This worked out really well for Josh, which was great. So we just hope that we can continue to count on your support.
The mayor spoke at the beginning about, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just thanking Chuck and asking Jim if you would like to add anything to that as well.
Yes, Dr. Higgins, please.
Well, thank you. Just real quickly, again, thank you all for your support to this point in time. I do completely agree with what Josh is saying about the best is ahead. Just to reiterate, there's 3 companies in the world right now that can kind of do what we do. We went head to head with them in this latest RFP, and we won. We came out on top. One of them's in China. One of them we think is in the US, and then there's us, and we beat them. First time out, Grand Forks, North Dakota company, and we really think that bodes well for the future. So thanks again for all your support to this point.
Very good. And Mayor, at the beginning, you noted that we need to grow our way out of this. We can't cut our way out of this. Josh, you mentioned that I believe in support of that LIFT funding that you have from the state, you'll be coming back. Can you give us any kind of an idea of ballpark figures, what's going to be required?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking, Brett, and we do intend to come back. Ideally, we are seeking funds to go along with private equity. We have had institutional investment from the Aerospace Foundation, the 701 Angel Fund, and a private investment firm of former Microsoft executives. And we're looking to go beyond that. We do have some private opportunities within the state that we're currently actively working on, but we would like to couple that with LIFT funds as well as funds from this group. We will be asking for funds that would be possible in the $500,000 to $1 million range. We recognize in light of circumstances that the funds may be something that is a challenge to come up with. On the same token, we are looking at an opportunity stronger than ever. And so that is the range of some funds that we would ask. And if you ask what the primary use of those funds are, it's frankly to grow a team. I think it is safe to say the vast majority of the funds we have go into people and jobs, and good paying jobs.
People here, jobs here.
Yes.
Fantastic. All right. And Mr. Conlon is directing me. I need to start cutting things short here. So Brandon, move on. And I think we get to hear from Brianne next.
Yep, and I'll stay out of the way there, Brett. Brand can jump right in.
Please, Ms. Osowski. Oh, you're muted. So there we go. Hello, welcome.
Thank you for unmuting me. Hello, everyone. Thank you for taking the time today and inviting me here. As Brandon mentioned, I'm the CEO and founder of a company called Tailory. We are changing the way that brands and consumers discover one another and connect digitally. And all of this was really inspired, as Brandon mentioned as well, through my retail experience. So I own 2 brick and mortar stores here in Grand Forks. And I like to say that it was my deep dive into understanding how consumers make purchasing decisions. And And we've really been also thriving in this environment because consumers are looking for different ways to connect with brands that they align with. And that's exactly what Tailory does. So we are a team now of 5 full-time employees. We have a group of contractors of about 10. Brandon also mentioned we've raised now nearly $1.5 million. We're getting what we were looking to secure was $2 million, and we were right in pace to do that when COVID came along. But we're still continuing to seek different types of equity investment, private capital, and other opportunities. As mentioned as well, we just secured $750,000 from the North Dakota Lift Fund, which we're very, very excited about. A few other ways we're getting involved in the community is part of our team is remote. So we are set up remotely, which has allowed us to offer some amazing internships to UND students this summer. And we have had a great deal of interest, so much so that we're thinking of expanding our internship program to offer more opportunities for students in the community. Many of those who have actually already graduated. So we would like to see those turn into full-time positions. It's our goal to attract and retain talent here. And we just, we're a thriving startup company based right here in Grand Forks, and so excited to be a part of it. So happy to answer any questions you may have.
Very good. And like the presentation we just heard from Josh, this is an idea that was a great idea before COVID, and in some ways is going to be even more important in the COVID era. I told you when we first got to meet and you described your idea to me that it sent a shiver up my spine and a tear in this old councilman's eye because it seemed to be exactly the kind of innovation that we needed. Can you give us a quick description of exactly how it works?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, the goal of Tailory is to connect brands and consumers in a new way. And what we're really looking at is understanding how consumers make purchasing decisions and why they are attracted to certain types of products or brands. We're really with COVID also, we're driving into what we like to see a values type of economy where people are making product decisions based on what's important to them. So maybe they're looking for eco-friendly products, products made in North Dakota, products that were founded by women-owned companies. And we then help them to discover them. On the brand side, what we're doing for small and medium-sized businesses is we're really leveling the playing field in digital marketing because we found a way to democratize advertising, as we'd like to say, giving everyone an equal chance. And you can really think of it as a matchmaking service for consumers and products. Mm-hmm. So
instead of my online identity being the result of logarithms and then me buying everything from Amazon, I can connect with you, decide who I want to be online, and you'll connect me with local buying options or others that fit my interests.
Exactly. And another point too that I should really mention about Tailory is that we're a data first company focusing on data privacy for consumers and how our digital identities are presented online, and then giving consumers the opportunity to curate that themselves, to decide how they want to be viewed online, to decide what type of advertising they want coming their way, rather than seeing a pop-up that you see because of what you've been doing online, the behavior that you've been taking. We're trying to humanize AI in a way that makes it as a more pleasurable experience for consumers, but also really giving them a voice in the conversation. So really opening up marketing and creating a two-way street rather than just having marketing ads come right at you.
Right here in Grand Forks. We're lucky to have you. Committee members, any questions, comments? Real good. Thanks for joining us again today, Brianne.
Yes, thank you.
And will there'll be an ask? Can we anticipate seeing you again? When will we see you next?
Yeah, so our funding gap has left us about $500,000. So we're hoping to make a formal ask whenever we're invited to.
Very good. All right. We hope to see you soon. Thanks
Thank
again.
you.
And Brandon, or just hand it over to Amy directly? How would we like to move?
Probably hand it over to Amy unless Todd had something to say there.
Chairman Weber, I wanted to say, we referenced these LIFT funds just so when we get through them, something comes back. What our intent was working with Brandon and Keith that those lift our loans and that we try to emulate something locally that would look similar to that mechanism that is being used at the state level. So if you come back for a 500,000 or $1 million, whatever that amount might be, that we can emulate something close to what the state program is in moving forward. So we have some symmetry, just like we've tried to create symmetry with our startup loans with the Bank of North Dakota. So that's what we've talked about initially. Just so if you're wondering, you know, is it just a cash grant? We're trying to emulate something that the state of North Dakota is doing, but having our own local flair with that. Just so the committee understands. So if we're on the wrong track, that's what we're hoping to emulate here locally.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Phelan. And these are innovative days over at the Center for Innovation. We're lucky to have Ms. Whitney with us. Amy, take it away, please. Tell us about what you're up to.
Thank you, Chairman Weber, Mayor Braun, members of the committee. I appreciate your willingness to take some time to hear an update from us as well about an exciting project that we have been working on through the EDA. It's called their Build to Scale program, and we've been working with Mr. Bumbuck and Mr. Lund at the EDC, and also some of the city staff leadership and Todd Phelan and Ms. Richards, to really think about how can we do more to increase tech sector job opportunity and tech sector startups like Airtonomy and Tailory that you heard from today. So we submitted back on March 24th a 10-slide deck concept proposal to the EDA to basically say we wanted to build on Mayor Brown's vision for Grand Forks to really build a downtown tech sector. And so we submitted to them a concept proposal for a downtown tech hub that would be in that opportunity zone downtown. And the idea would be is that this grant would give us an opportunity to identify a project manager to help us realize this vision for this downtown tech hub. And the idea is that the downtown tech hub would coordinate entrepreneurial resources and commercialization activity, streamline access to startup capital, formalize some industry sector mentorship and networking opportunities, and also enhance workforce upskill training for tech sector job opportunities so that we can really really put a full package together that goes, end to end as we look at tech sector startups, but also tech sector jobs. And the idea is that, we really can enhance and harness a lot of the opportunities that are happening regionally, really look at making all those assets that we have even more competitive and really incubate scalable tech startups and make sure that we're enhancing the upskilling that we need for the workforce. The idea is that when we would have this project manager, that we would actually locate them downtown so that they can really help build that vision and really energize the downtown sector and the downtown region. And all of the partners that have helped in building this vision, both at the EDC and with the city. We've also worked with and talked with the Grand Challenge champions at UND when we look at the industry sectors that we're looking to really and truly support. We know that they're critical and emerging industry sectors for North Dakota, and we know there's an opportunity here. So we're excited for this opportunity. We think that it's a way to, as the mayor said, grow out of this opportunity. Our timeline, just to kind of give you an idea of what we're looking at. So we're waiting to hear back from the EDA on this concept proposal. We're waiting for a full invitation to write for the full proposal. We should hear, I'm hoping, fingers crossed, in the next week or so, but they have until May 19th to get back to us for that invitation. That full application is due June 14th, but we actually have to back that date up to about June 4th because UND and the Center for Innovation will be the fiscal agent for this grant. So we have to give some time for us to get through our process internally at UND to go through paperwork and signatures. So we're looking at a June 4th deadline. The idea being is we'd hope to come back to this committee at some point and talk to them about what we have to produce for this grant will be some matching funds. The university has committed to helping with that, but we're also looking for other partners, both in the private sector and elsewhere, to help us create that match for this grant. So happy to answer any questions that this committee has.
Very good. And this work is directly in line with the work that Council President Sandy has taken on with the city. Mr. Sandy, do you have anything to speak to on this?
Yeah, thank you, Brett. I had a very nice visit with Ms. Whitney last week about it. It sounds like this is right up the mayor's alley of what he was pushing for his tech hub downtown. Certainly would be a good addition to have somebody spearhead, although not that Brandon hasn't been doing a very good job, but that'd be nice to have that local tie with the university so that we can foster the students as they're coming through UND and provide resources for them to found and obviously start new businesses, bring those businesses to downtown, create new jobs for our community. So I think it's a great opportunity for the city of Grand Forks. Thank you, Mr. Weber.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Questions, comments from committee members? All right. Thank you, Amy. Thanks for taking the time to meet with us.
Thank you, everyone.
It's hard to imagine very many communities during these challenging, uncertain times that would have as much to celebrate as we got here today. And the good news keeps coming. Mr. Brooks, item number 6, business park lot purchase offer from Mid-Continent Communications.
Thank you, Brett. I'll try to, hopefully I can share my screen here, Andy.
There you go. You should be able to now.
Thank you. For those who hopefully are aware, we have the business park out here. Interstate is along this stretch here. Here's 32nd. We recently had a sale that we worked through in this area here. That was the Bakken sale that you'll hear about in a little bit. Border States is up here, and FedEx and Acme. We have an offer now for Mid-Continent. It's right in this area here. It's for 2.81 acres. It is a piece that's 5.81 today. And so splitting that up still leaves us with a very sellable piece in the 3-acre range, and would be on the corner of South 48th Street. Just to give you a little idea what's around there, there's a pond that takes up the stormwater that's needed due to those federal state laws. And here's a lift station here. So that's some of what's going on around that area. But with that, we're recommending approval as written in the staff report.
Very good. Questions or comments from committee members? My understanding of this deal is it's nothing but good news. This is exactly where we want to be moving. The lot is cut in half, but it still leaves another nice sized lot for future sale.
That's correct. Yep.
I'll move approval.
We have a motion from Mr. Holt. Looking for a second. Second from Mr. Wolf. Any further comments or questions? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item 7, authorize Northern Plains Nitrogen NPN plume analysis study update. Mr. Phelan?
Whoever, yeah. Time is short, so I will kind of summarize. I from 2015 is when we put a lot of effort into this. Tom Schauer from KLJ is going to give you some visuals, but a lot of work went on in 2015 with the Grand Forks Airport Authority, UND, and others. The JDA hired a third party to assist us along the way. Mr. Schauer and KLJ did a lot of the airport related items. And really what the conclusion was, we had two of our clusters. One was our agribusiness cluster, who wanted to locate a $2 billion plus nitrogen plant versus our airport. That's really important, along with UND Aerospace. So the conclusion was, as part of the third party analysis, could we move forward in a mitigated fashion with these two economic clusters? Really what occurred is, as we worked through the study on the plume analysis, the solution was an abated cooling tower that reduced the amount of visual plumes that were created via less water and running at a lower temperature. And so going into it, before we had more of a wet tower, we were looking at a 2.64% as part of a cooling tower interference. And then with the abated tower, we went down to 0.62%. So it was a significant impact in a positive way forward. Then after 2015, we took a little bit of a pause just because NPN stalled out a little bit on the investment side. And so over the last, I'll say 4 to 5 years, we've been kind of in a pause right now. Two things are coming together. Number one, the airport authority is moving forward with a new airport master plan that requires them to rebuild the north-south runway. That will also mean that we're going to renovate one of the east-west runways for commercial traffic so that we can keep the airport operating. The other issue is Larry Mackey has followed up with me to say that they feel like it's even more imminent than ever that they are going to get financing for their project moving forward. So those two things are coming forward. And so what's in front of you today is to move forward with an updated plume analysis that will take a look at what new things have gone on, in particular with this new runway, so that we have additional and new data in which to move forward with. We'd move forward with those similar stakeholders that were part of the original study that we were able to move forward with. And really what we came to the conclusion with, both with the airport authority and with UND, is that I think both generally felt with mitigation that we could move forward, but they also wanted to be incorporated into any final agreements as we move forward. We never got into the final agreements because we put a period on it for a while. So we're kind of back to this point. Let's update the study so that we know what the mitigating factors are. And if it's true that Mr. Mackey and NPN come back forward with additional investment, we'll have this update completed along the way. I suspect it'll take another 2 to 3 months to update. Maybe Mr. Schauer, it'll be less than that. The other thing I followed up with the airport authority and Mr. Riesinger is that tentatively, without board approval, they'd be willing to cost share on this analysis. Right now, it's an approximately $49,000 study to move forward. There may be some add-ons we have to do, but right now that's what we're looking at around $50,000. So today we're asking for you to move forward with an agreement of that approximate $49,000 with KLJ, subject to final review and approval by our city attorney and subject to any needed budget amendments from our Jobs Development Authority. So with that, I'd ask Tom Schauer to kind of give us an overview and maybe some sight lines so you can kind of generally see what we're talking about as part of the update.
Very good. Thanks, Todd. Mr. Schauer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll see if I can do some screen sharing here real quick, just to give you a little bit of feel for what we're looking at. Okay, hopefully you can see outline of a presentation.
We sure can. Yep.
I'm going to make it quick. I know your timeline is very tight. Just a couple of things that are going on in the analysis really is looking at a couple different pieces. One is the height of structures, which would be referred to as like an airspace analysis through the Federal Aviation Administration. Those would be things comparing the NPM site, which is the green area up in the right corner, with the airfield and airfield operations. We're not anticipating that, just like last time, to have much change or concern. The other items that go into play is last time we also had a thermal analysis, which is really looking at the thermal heat coming off the plant, what that does in the aircraft that would be flying over or in and around the plant area. That was a little bit of an overview of what was done on the thermal side. What you're seeing there is a foot radius. Here's the site. I don't know if you can see it very well online. It's the green boundary. The red dot is roughly the footprint of that thermal plume. Wanting to make sure that no pilots fly over that, especially student pilots. So there would be some general routing changes and checkpoint changes. UND has a very complex airspace process coming in and out of the airport just due to the sheer volume they do. As our last study had, and we know our next study would have this as well, as they would need to reconfigure that checkpoint use, modifying flight procedures, and notification to the community as well as to what those all look like. So you have that thermal plume element. The biggest one we know is going to have some impacts, as we also had visual analysis. And I'm going to give you just a real quick, and I apologize for the complexity of some of this, is each traffic pattern for each runway is predicated on the size of the aircraft using that runway. As Todd said, the outcome of the master plan that was just completed at the airport is looking at not only the reconstruction of the main runway, but to make sure that the airfield doesn't shut down during that main runway construction. We're also going to be extending and widening or at least extending, maybe widening and strengthening the crosswind runway to allow air carrier service on that. That also gets rid of some convergence things that were going on at the airfield that air traffic control was managing right now. What that actually does, if you can see on the left corner of the screen, there is a larger aircraft traffic box, which is approximately 4 feet by 2 feet. Since our new crosswind runway would be handling air carrier, cargo, and business jets, that traffic pattern box of a larger size would be placed also on the northeast-west runway. If you can see, and again, I apologize, I'm gonna try to blow this up a little bigger. The plume over here, the yellow dot, or the site, NPM site, that increased box, what you see there is the smaller pattern that was done in the original study, would expand to approximately double its size and encapsulate the plume site. That's going to change some of the complexities in the analysis and likely drive some increased impact. Additionally, with the ability for air traffic to switch patterns to the east-west without having conflict with air carriers, cargo, and business jets, they will likely see much more use of an east-west pattern than was done at the original study. So that, going back, and Todd covered on like the 6.2 analysis and some of the other pieces, so I'm going to forego those discussions. We already talked about, some of the things people ask me is, well, what's changed? The last study was completed in the late summer of 2015. The airport master plan study started that fall. Completed last year, identified several needs. The key one was, though, is the increased size of the crosswind runway that would carry both air cargo, air carrier, and business jets. Generally, what you would see, it'll also be changing, just as an FYI, is County Road 5 will also be relocated as part of that to jog out in and around the area, for those that may not be aware that that's in discussion as well. But those are the key points that are going through it. Again, the biggest issue goes into you can see on the left side, the larger aircraft pattern is notably larger compared to the smaller one. This is the north configuration for north-south. East-west is going to have that same larger traffic pattern that will cover the NPM site. And those will be the items that are analyzed in this future study. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Schauer. Any questions or comments from committee members? And
Mr. Weber?
Yes, please, Mr. Sanders.
Hey, so just a question, and I believe based upon the images I'm looking at, it's already going to be covered, but you're looking at the plume, the thermal plume, as well as the steam plume, correct?
The thermal plume uses a FAA or software provided by the FAA or hired MITRE Corporation to use the thermal elements that would be steam, and it would also, in this study we're proposing right now, is the thermal plume, I don't believe, changes from where we're at before. In essence, that area, and I'm gonna jump back real quick to the area that would be in the green box, I would argue should be avoided regardless of any of the towers used, because there's multiple variations. Any of these areas we believe should be avoided by air traffic, and that doesn't change on anything we're doing right now. So we weren't planning on updating that portion of the study. If you guys would like, we certainly can. But I believe the software is relatively the same. We actually, the software used in the analysis was the beta test version and then re-verified with the first version out by the MITRE Corporation. In addition then, not only the thermal, when you say steam, I refer to that more as the visual or loss of sight. So I refer to it instead of steam as visual. And that is the other one that had the, where we go into the different size boxes. And that is actually looking at individual plume. And for those of you that cut into a little more details, the pollution model used by NPN to clear their environmental, we use that model that identifies a point of plume on an hourly basis. We use and create a reading on that that is analyzed both in size, because it has a dimensional width and height, that is in compared to a spatial model of each of these boxes on here are actually a three-dimensional box that gets analyzed. If any part of the plume touches that box as a visual analysis, we said it is impacting the airport. These boxes are determined by FAA Order 7400.2 and referred to as traffic pattern boxes. The imagery, you'll see a lot of squiggly lines. Those are actually radar tracks of aircraft using that particular runway. And the reason we gathered that information, we wanted to make sure that for the most part, we were capturing what we thought we were capturing using the FAA order. And you can see that on there.
Anything further, Mr. Sandy?
Yeah, just one quick question. And thank you, Mr. Shower. That explains very clearly what I was thinking about. Assuming we move forward and update the study, what are we going to do with the results?
Mr. Phelan?
I think the result is similar to the last time. It'll go into, feedback from our airport authority, UND, and the city and city council on a further determination of whether we can live with the results. I think the other part of the results were from, say there's some impacts. How are those impacts are going to get addressed, whether it's mitigation, whether it's some sort of cost share. There can be various things that we'll have to work through. So that's what I expect when we get to the end.
Mr. Weber, if I may.
Of course.
It's unfortunate, but I know that when we get to the end of that study, there are going to be varying opinions based upon the data that's produced. I would venture to guess that different groups are going to have different opinions, and their opinions are going to be swayed by their business requirements, their personal bias, whatever. I would suggest, rather than taking NPN's word for it, or UND's word for it, or the airport authority's word for it, once we get these results, we should consider hiring an unbiased consultant to review the results and provide an opinion. That's a discussion for another day, though.
And I think with Tom Shower and KLJ, I think they can do an independent third-party analysis, and they're familiar with the first, because they were part of the first third-party analysis. So I feel confident that they're going to give us the outcomes, and at the end of the day, it'll have to be a policymaker decision on how to move forward. And if we need to do further study after that, we can always choose to do that.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Please, yes, please.
One of the things that I would throw out as a discussion item in the initial analysis, there was mitigation in general that came out of it that mentioned and identified multiple changes in traffic pattern and aspects of UND's operations. One of the things that I think would be valuable is during the outcome of this, if those mitigations were further evaluated to see how achievable they are. Because, we think they are all things that can be done. However, when you're working with a federal entity and a dynamic group as University of North Dakota that has, like I said, hundreds of thousands of operations, and that's a very complex process to change. I think those are things that in the last study were identified as items that I don't think would change in the outcome of this. And I think that process to take what is a hypothetical, hey, these are mitigations that need to be implemented, moving those to the next realm is how feasible in reality can those be done and how quickly could those be done?
And Mr. Weber, if I could add, there's further study about beyond this. You know, we did an initial study. The initial offsite infrastructure costs were around $50 million, and we certainly would have to engage with our state folks and how we'd share that. We've done some of that stuff already with direct discharge at our wastewater treatment plant. So some of those capital improvements we've already made. So that would have to be further studied. Also the health and safety plan, whether that's fire response, ensuring that, and further ensuring that the plant is designed and constructed to a certain form and fashion. We haven't moved forward with any of that. So, you know, just beyond this plume analysis itself, we have a lot more work to do in concert if we're going to move forward with this project too.
Very good. And Mr. Schauer, if I could have you stop sharing your screen now. Thank you. Further comments or questions from committee members? We are looking for a motion on the proposal to fund the study.
I'll make a motion.
We have a motion from Mr. Weigel.
I'd second.
A second from Ms. Doctor. Further questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign, motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Schauer. And final item on the agenda today, item 8, administrative update. Ms. Richards, Mr. Phelan.
I'll be as quick as I possibly can. As you know, in this COVID crisis, our local lenders are being asked to be flexible with their borrowers, and we know that the JDA will be getting that same level of requests. We have in fact had one already. So I'm working with Mr. Wolf and Chairman Weber. We've attempted to come up with an interim policy that we could apply administratively. The impact we expect to be relatively small, in that the number of active loans that the JDA has right now is, I think we have 8 borrowers with another 6 that would possibly come online by the end of the year. What we're looking at is not to actively promote that we would consider forbearance, but if a borrower comes to us, communicate with them directly on what their needs are, what the problem is, their plan to solve it, and then how much forbearance time they're looking at. Once we get that information, assuming that staff and Chairman Weber are comfortable with that, then we would administratively approve up to 90 days of forbearance with the option for another 90 days tagged on to the end of that. The idea being we want to be a little more nimble than making each applicant come to a committee meeting that meets, you know, at most once a month and move it on. Again, I'm trying to really accelerate that, but we're just looking for kind of a head nod that the committee is comfortable with this process as has been worked out amongst Chairman Weber and Mr. Wolf and staff.
This approach is the result of many different conversations. Thanks for your input, Chris. Any questions or comments from committee members?
This is Jonathan. I'm fine with that. I would just add that I think all of us too are under the understanding that with times like these that we're happy to meet more than once a month if we need to. So if it comes to that and you feel like the committee needs to meet more often, even if it's for brief periods of times, I'm happy to do that. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Appreciate that.
That's appreciated. Other quick update, we did miss the March meeting, and so some items went right to JDA. Those items, just wanted to run through them real quick for your general knowledge. We did have another lot sale in the business park that was to Baca Land Enterprises or Pro Transport. So that was approved, as we discussed during the budget, at about $640,000 sales price. 2 flex pace loans were approved, one associated with that same project for construction of the facility out there. And then another flex pays to HB Sound and Light for equipment purchase. That one was relatively small, $17,000 from the growth fund and a $250,000 commercial loan. The Pro Transport one was more significant, over $107,000 from the JDA. And then we had 2 startup loans, one from Persephone's Floral, which is obviously a floral shop. That was approved at $18,000, and a request from French Taste, the what's the French pancake called? The crepe maker. Anyway, his was tabled by the North Dakota Development Fund for a month, but we anticipate that coming back in the May meeting. Okay, it's 4 minutes to Committee of the Whole. I'm going to stop talking so we can adjourn.
Lots of time. Lots of good news. Let's hope, Mr. Holt, that we have continued activity. Maybe we have to meet twice a month. That'd be great. Any other comments or questions? Anything else to be said for the good of the order? Hearing none, looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion for Mr. Wolf, second for Mr. Weigel. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.